Thank you for the privilege of speaking at this forum. Looking back at living with chronic kidney disease, I realize how much I accepted at face value until events forced me to question what prevention really means. For over 2 decades, CKD sat quietly in the background of my life. In 2021, a kidney injury from COVID changed that. Within a year, I was declared stage 5 and placed on the active transplant list. I had assumed my kidneys were declining slowly. I felt perfectly well, but that was an illusion. I learned that stage 5 doesn't mean decline. It means failure. Life's goal shifted from progress to preservation, to stay well, remain transplant ready, and delay dialysis for as long as possible. I've been asked to speak today on the theme, if I could change one thing. At a personal level, it's quite simple. I would turn the clock back 25 years and apply what I've learned in the last 4. It comes down to this. No matter how much support exists, my kidney care is my responsibility. Patient education finally gave me a holistic view of living with kidney disease. The content was valuable, but the timing was not. It felt like preparing me for replacement therapy rather than preserving what I still had. That's not a criticism of patient education. It's a sequencing issue. And that brings me to the one system change I would make. First slide, please. I would establish active preservation as a formal way of working in a currently unstructured long middle. Kidney care today is strongest in the downstream end. Dialysis and transplant are areas of excellence. Upstream, prevention focuses on identifying people at risk and managing contributing conditions, particularly high blood pressure and diabetes. And yet, between prevention upstream and therapy downstream sits a long, quiet phase, what I call the long middle, where most people with CKD actually live. And because people feel well during this time, that quietness lulls both the individual and the system into inaction. That's not a clinical lapse. It's a design gap. The numbers reflect the scale of the opportunity. According to Kidney Care UK's January 2026 published data, around 7.2 million people in the UK live with kidney disease. Of that, about 4 million are in the early stages 1 to 3A. That's where strategy can have its greatest impact, because time is still on our side and progression is still modifiable. I've been reflecting on the meaning of prevention in CKD. Once CKD is recognized, prevention changes meaning. CKD is not reversible. What we are doing is preserving function, not preventing disease. The term preservation by itself can sound passive. It requires intent and action. That is why I call it active preservation. So what is active preservation? It is a shift in how the long middle is structured. Active preservation is not a rejection of what already exists. It is an evolution, carrying preventive intent into ongoing care. It accepts that disease is present and recognizes that timing and trajectory remain modifiable. Dialysis and transplant remain essential anchors of care. Active preservation improves preparedness and outcomes when those therapies are required. Next slide, please. In practice, active preservation works by compounding the effects of three coordinated levers: medicines, nutrition expertise, and education. None is sufficient alone. Together, they amplify one another. Delivering this consistently at scale requires coordination. That's where digital tools and increasingly AI enable coordinated and continuous adjustment of care. They can make dietary input measurable against outcomes and education more accessible. Let me address diet and medicines. This is where active preservation has the largest impact. Medicines don't act in isolation. Their efficacy is shaped by diet. Diet can amplify or blunt their effect. In kidney disease, medicines largely target contributing conditions. By contrast, diet acts directly on the kidneys every day. And that makes diet one of the most powerful levers we have to influence progression. But kidney diet is neither intuitive nor universal. Requirements change with individual conditions and stage. As kidney functions change, so do nutritional needs, making structured dietetic input essential. In a world of largely unregulated online advice, people with CKD are exposed to guidance that may be inappropriate, even harmful. Yet, while medicines are prescribed, monitored, and adjusted with precision, diet is offered as optional generic advice. That imbalance is a design issue. So if diet is disease modifying, it needs to be designed, prescribed, monitored, and adjusted with the same rigor as medication. That means dietitians functioning as co-pilots, not occasional advisors, and co-owning progression outcomes with measurable accountability. This raises the issue of workforce and cost, and I'll come to that shortly. Timing is everything in patient education. When it comes late, it feels like preparation for dialysis. Introduced earlier, it becomes empowering knowledge. On-site education matters, but on its own, it is not enough. People are working, caring for family, or simply private about their condition. Digital and blended formats allow smaller modules that can be revisited and shared with family and carers. Next slide, please. CKD cannot be reversed, but its rate of progression can be slowed. Even small changes in slope made early and sustained can translate into long periods of freedom from therapy. Let me illustrate the scale. Around 4 million people are currently in early stages. If just 1% of that group, around 40,000, progress to dialysis over an average of 20 years, that would mean an average of 2,000 of these people reaching dialysis each year. Within active preservation framework, if each delayed dialysis by just 1 year, with annual per patient dialysis cost at 35,000, the avoided cost could be in the region of 70 million pounds per year. That could fund up to 2,000 additional dietitians. And all of this is from just 1% uptake. To put that in context, currently there are fewer than 190 spread over 40 renal units across the UK. Small early shifts in trajectory compound into large system impact, reducing pressure on workforce, capacity, and services. And because new patients enter the long middle every year, that benefit is potentially perpetual. End slide, please. To sum up, if I could change one thing, it would be to establish active preservation as a formal way of working in the currently unstructured long middle. My window of active preservation is largely behind me. But for the 4 million currently in the early stages, and for those who will enter that phase in the years and decades ahead, it is not. Time is still on their side and on ours to act. System change is complex. It requires evidence, expertise, funding, and time. I understand that. But change always begins the same way, with one idea, one conviction, and one voice willing to stand up and say, this is where responsibility lies, and we can no longer look away. And if strategy does not explicitly design for the long middle, the system will continue to manage failure downstream rather than preserve health upstream. Thank you.